Hello, welcome to chapter 2. Congratulations on finding the YouTube video. So this week we're going to be talking about the genetic and evolutionary roots of behavior. And we'll be talking about genetics and DNA, evolution by natural selection, the genetics and evolution of behavior. We'll have some final thoughts, and then we'll have a summary of the material. To get us started, I think it might be helpful to watch a video on YouTube about how genes influence behavior.
Geneticists are trying to figure out if certain genes can explain differences in behavior like thrill-seeking, aggression, and nurturing. For every 100,000 people who enjoy hiking in the mountains, for example, only 1 or 2 feel the need to climb to the top of Mount Everest. How can we explain this variation in behavior? How much does it have to do with family background or life experience? Or are some people just born wanting to take on extreme challenges? Research over the past few years has shown that the genetics behind complex behavior is trickier than we first thought. Differences in behavior aren't the result of 1, 2, or even a handful of genes. Consider the most famous of lab insects, the lowly fruit fly, known to scientists as Drosophila melanogaster. These fruit flies naturally fight over food, like who gets access to a tasty piece of rotten banana. Researchers now think the activity of 4,000 of the fruit fly's 15,000 genes determine how tough the insects will get with each other. So if the genetics of behavior is that complicated in a fruit fly, imagine how complicated it would be for a human. After all, the brain of a fruit fly contains around 100,000 neurons, while the brain of a human contains 100 billion neurons, or 1,000,000 times as many neurons as a fruit fly. The bottom line? Any study claiming a single gene can predict whether you're gay, prone to violence, a liberal, or a conservative is probably not going to pan out in the end. Nor are we likely to ever find a gene for extreme mountain climbing. For Scientific American's Instant Egghead, I'm Christine Gorman.
Okay, so as she just explained to us, there are multiple elements that influence the expression of a specific gene and how that impacts our behavior. So let's kind of break that down. The nucleus of each biological cell, or so each cell in our body, contains chromosomes which each have a single molecule of DNA. Within the molecule, genes govern the cell's functioning by providing detailed instructions for making proteins. So here are some examples of some different types of cells. We have red blood cells, goblet cells, and rod cells. Each of these types of cells contain DNA within their nucleus or nuclei that make proteins that tell that cell how to express itself and contribute to the body's growth and development. So here's an example of human skin shown at about 200 times its actual size. Each one of those cells contains a nucleus. Each nucleus contains 46 chromosomes. Chromosomes carry the instructions for how to build and operate the body. Within the chromosomes are coiled up strands of DNA. The DNA has a double helix shape, and the rungs of the double helix shape are made up of complementary chains of proteins called thymine, guanine, cytosine, and adenine. Humans specifically have 23 pairs of chromosomes and roughly 25,000 protein-coding genes. Collectively, those are called the human's genome. So again, like we said, the human genome consists of 23 pairs of chromosomes. In each cell, some of these genes are expressed at any point in time and others are not. So what influences whether or not a gene is expressed is controlled by the biochemical environment inside the cell and just outside the cell, which is influenced by the organism's overall environment, experience, and behavior. So for example, if I have a gene that expresses how much muscle mass I have, however, I continue to exercise daily and lift weights, my experience is going to impact how that gene is expressed and how my muscles develop and build. So an organism's genome specifies just the genotype, not necessarily the phenotype. The phenotype is the product of the genotype with experience and that continual interaction between the two. So the phenotype is how someone looks or how the gene is expressed when it, the physical appearance of it. How do we get our genome? Well, we have the chromosomes from the mom and the chromosomes from the dad. Each zygote, the egg or the sperm, carries 23, so 1/2 of each set. And then those combine to give you a total of 46, or 23 pairs. Most characteristics are influenced by the interaction or the action of many genes. So each gene is paired with another gene. Those pairs are located at corresponding positions in pairs on each of the chromosomes. Our modern understanding of genetics grows from Mendel's pioneering work almost 150 years ago. Okay, what's the difference between dominant and recessive genes? So each gene may or may not be the same allele. If they are different, one gene may be dominant and the other may be recessive, or the genes may be codominant, or one may be incompletely dominant. Here's an example. Oops. So the inheritance of dimples. Dimples are one of the few traits largely determined by a variation in just one gene. If someone inherits the allele that favors dimples from both parents, meaning the person's genotype is DD, the person will almost certainly have dimples. If someone inherits the allele from neither parent, genotype lowercase dd, then dimples are unlikely. What if the person is heterozygous? The allele favoring the dimples is dominant, and so the genotype big D little d usually leads to dimples. So you can see that. So from the sperm, they have big D little d, and from one egg, they have big D little d. There's 4 different phenotypes that could come out of that, 4 different ways it could look, as well as, 2 different ways it could look, 3 of which are the same, 1 of which is different, and 4 different genotypes. So 2 different phenotypes, 4 different genotypes. So you could have 2 dominant, which would give you dimples. You could have 1 dominant, 1 recessive, which would lead to still having dimples. 1 dominant, 1 recessive the other direction, still have dimples. Or 2 recessive, which would mean no dimples.